Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I'm going to break down what React and ReactDOM do for us as libraries, because so far we really used a lot of the syntactic sugar, meaning the much more easy way to write React using JSX. But in order for us to get a good idea of how the React and ReactDOM libraries actually work, I think it's easier if we just learn about both these libraries from scratch. So here, what you can do is you can watch me or you can follow along, whichever style you prefer to learn. Both are perfectly fine because we're really just going to dive into some of the more top-level API that React and ReactDOM provide for us that typically gets obfuscated when you're writing in JSX. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my terminal and I'm just going to create a new directory called Pure React. And then I'm going to cd into it and I'm going to touch an index.html file. Touch essentially writes this file for us. So then I'm just going to open up my VS Code inside of this folder. I'm going to wait a little bit for everything to load because sometimes when you open up your files, you might notice that it takes a little bit of time for VS Code to actually start indicating the things that it can do for you. But once you're inside, if you start typing HTML, you should see an auto suggestion. This, again, you might have to wait a little bit for your VS Code to start running up and all of these services to become available. But the moment it does, I want you to select HTML5. And what this will do is it'll write for us a quick template of what the base HTML file should look like. Inside of the body, I'm going to create a div. And this div, I'm going to give an ID of root. This is pretty much the exact same index.html file that we had inside of our Create React app, minus a couple of the optimizations that they create for us. But the key thing that I want you to focus on is the fact that there is a div with the ID root. Remember, before what React was doing was we were taking our application and we were replacing this div with the ID root with our entire application. So we're still going to do the same thing. We're just not going to do it JSX anymore. Now I'm also going to write some code inside of the div so that I know that when my React code mounts, I'm going to actually be aware that React is working. And we'll talk about how that works. But first, let's just type in React is not rendered. This way, it's very clear to me when React is rendered versus it's not rendered. Right now, this is just a raw HTML file, and we'll do everything in raw JavaScript. But once you've done this, you're going to go into your code and you're just going to open up index.html inside of your browser. Inside the browser, you will see React is not rendered. So here, everything is working as we expect. The next thing we need to do is actually bring in both the React and ReactDOM libraries. Now you might be wondering, what is the difference between React and ReactDOM and why do I need both? Well, you can kind of see the React library as the engine. React does a lot of the diffing, a lot of the optimizations, a lot of determining what to render and how, whereas ReactDOM determines what we're trying to render to. Specifically, ReactDOM renders to the DOM. So really what you're building is DOM elements. React Native allows you to build native elements. There might be React VR. Essentially, there's different ways that you might be building specific UI for some device or some platform. ReactDOM is the one that we use for the browser, but multiple of these different libraries all leverage the React engine code under the hood. So that's the difference between React and ReactDOM, and we're going to need both. So what I want you to do is go into your resources folder and you're going to see this URL. This points you directly to the source code of React. This website called Unpackage is a great place that hosts all the actual source code for a lot of these different libraries that we use. So I'm going to copy down this, go back into my application, and then I'm going to write a script tag where the source points to React. Next, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the ReactDOM library. So here I'm going to get this script started. I'm going to come over. And what you're going to do is you are going to copy now the ReactDOM script that I have for you inside your resource folder as well. And you just add that to your source and save. Once you save, go back to the index.html document we had, open up your console, and also refresh. Once you refresh, you now actually have both the React and ReactDOM libraries loaded. Inside your console, if you start typing React, you'll see right there that you'll get something, which is the entire package that React has added under the React namespace. Similarly, you'll have ReactDOM as well. So now we know both React and ReactDOM libraries have been added, but they haven't done any code yet because we haven't written any of the code that we need to. So now what we need to do is we need to simulate the behavior that we had before with React. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to write a third script. This new script is going to be the way that we actually render our JavaScript code that utilizes React and ReactDOM. So to start, what I'm going to do is I am actually going to define the app component. And if we remember, components in React are just functions that return a set of UI instructions that React uses to render HTML. In our particular case, those set of instructions before we were writing in JSX. But now we can actually do this a different way. So what I'm going to do is declare this const app, and inside of this app, I want to return back React creating elements. And the way you do this is you use React.createElement. JSX is really just a fancy way that React adds syntactic sugar for all this code that we're going to write now using createElement. And React createElement, this method takes 3 arguments. The first argument is going to take the component that you want to render. So you can either pass it a string or you can pass it a component, meaning it could be a functional component or a class component. We'll figure out more once we actually understand how to use these components, but for now, let's just pass it a string. And as far as the string goes, all I want to write is a div. So by passing the string div, React knows, oh, you want to create a div. The second argument is an object where the key value pairs contain the different attributes we want for this. So class, ID, or any other additional properties that we want to add all would go into this specific object. This is kind of like props. You can see it like that. The third argument is going to be what children do we want to nest inside of it. And typically we pass this as an array. You can pass this also as a text node, which we're going to do for the next child that we add in here. Because right now it's just an empty div. And inside what I want to do is I want to pass in a string. And I'm going to pass that string inside of an h1. So how do I do that? Well, I need to make a new h1. And you might have guessed it that we need to use React.createElement again in order to create the h1. So I'm going to call it h1. I'm going to pass it a class, and here you can use class or class name. Both are viable. I'm going to pass it specifically, though, a class, and I'm going to say that the class is title. So the reason why in here you can pass it class and not class name, as we saw with JSX, is because inside of this is a key. So React is not treating this as a variable. Remember, when you write your keys, these React is going to interpret as a string anyways. So this is actually not protected as long as you use it as a class in your object. You can use class, you can use class name. React will render both over into class. So once I have my class, I am also going to now pass it a text. And here I'm going to say React is rendered. And what I'll do is I will save this. And now we have our app component. But this is not enough to actually render this onto the page. As we know before with React, React does that code where it takes your app and it actually renders it onto the DOM. And it targets this root component. So we have to write the code that will do that. And the code that will do that is I'm going to say ReactDOM.render, and then I'm going to say React.createElement because I want to create a new element that I'm trying to render to the page. And here I'm going to use my app component. So you actually just directly pass the variable name of your component. So in our particular case, it's const app. So I'm going to pass app through, and that's all I need. I don't need any attributes. I don't need any children in it. I just want to create this app component element. Then render needs a target. So it needs an element on the page that it can render to. This is where you're going to say document.getElementById, the same way that we had it before. And I'm going to target the ID of root. Now I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to my code and look at that. React is rendered. For a second there, you saw there was a flash, React is not rendered, and then React is rendered. The reason that's happening is because our scripts are waiting to get loaded in first, and then our React code that we wrote finally runs, which is why you see that flash for a second. This is now us being certain that our React code is working. And this is really all it is that React really does for us. If you really think about it, React with JSX is really just using React.createElement in place of the JSX code that we have. But it's significantly easier for us to write JSX, which looks like HTML and absorbs and takes in JavaScript variables, rather than constantly writing this verbose create element where we define what we're looking for, then the attributes, and then the children. But that's really all it's doing under the hood. It's really that simple. In the next video, we're going to take a look at a more specific example where we write a bit more of this pure React code so that we can really see and utilize React.createElement in order to build out some kind of functionality that looks more similar to the app that we had before. You can actually try it yourself first, play around with this library and really learn it. And in the next video, we'll do a quick little experiment where we'll see how far we can push it. So I'll see you in the next video.